The black belt sat coiled in the bottom drawer like a sleeping snake. Waiting. Emma Collins traced its worn edges with trembling fingers. Remembering her father's calloused hands tying it around her waist just 8 months ago, before the drunk driver stole everything that mattered. Now, staring at her reflection in the unfamiliar bedroom mirror of their cramped Dallas apartment, Emma barely recognized the hollow-eyed girl looking back. The moving boxes still lined the walls like cardboard tombstones, each one a reminder of the life they'd left behind in California. Her mother's muffled sobs drifted through paper-thin walls, the same sound that had haunted their nights since the funeral. "Emma, honey, you need to leave in 10 minutes. Her mother's voice cracked through the door, trying to sound normal, trying to sound like the woman who used to pack elaborate lunches and knew all the neighborhood gossip. But that woman had died in the hospital waiting room, holding Emma's hand while doctors delivered news that changed everything. Emma closed the drawer, leaving the belt buried beneath old photographs and her father's Purple Heart. Master Gunnery Sergeant James Collins had taught her that strength wasn't about the belt around your waist, it was about the steel in your spine. But steel could bend. And Emma felt like she'd been bent so far she might never straighten again. Westfield High School loomed ahead through the passenger window like a fortress of red brick and teenage judgment. Students clustered in the parking lot beside lifted trucks and luxury cars, their laughter carrying across the morning air with the casual cruelty of those who belonged. Emma's stomach twisted as she watched them, their confidence radiating like heat waves off summer asphalt. "You don't have to do this today," her mother whispered, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles went white. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her uniform hung loose. She'd lost 20 pounds since the accident, surviving on coffee and determination. "We could wait another week. Maybe find you some tutoring first." "I'm fine, Mom." The lie tasted bitter. Emma had perfected this particular falsehood over the past 3 months, wearing it like armor against well-meaning neighbors and concerned teachers. Fine was easier than explaining how it felt to lose your anchor. Your North Star, your best friend, all in one terrible moment of twisted metal and shattered glass. She shouldered her backpack and walked toward the building, each step feeling like crossing a minefield. The morning Texas heat pressed against her skin, but she'd dressed carefully, jeans and a simple blue sweater that wouldn't draw attention. In California, she'd worn sundresses and bright colors, laughed loud enough to fill rooms. That girl felt like a stranger now. The hallways buzzed with the familiar chaos of high school locker doors slamming, sneakers squeaking against polished floors, fragments of conversation about weekend parties and upcoming tests. Emma found her locker and began the delicate dance of invisibility, keeping her head down, moving with purpose, but not urgency. Her father had taught her about situational awareness, about reading rooms and identifying threats. She was so focused on blending in that she almost missed him. Derek Matthews stood at the center of the cafeteria like a king holding court. His Letterman jacket stretched across broad shoulders that spoke of hours in the weight room. His dark hair caught the fluorescent lights, and when he smiled, it was the kind of smile that got boys out of trouble and girls into it. The football team surrounded him like satellites orbiting a star, hanging on his every word as he recounted some story that had them all laughing. Emma had seen boys like Derek before, the ones who moved through the world expecting it to part before them like the Red Sea. In California, she'd learned to navigate around them, to remain invisible to their particular brand of attention. But as she carried her lunch tray toward an empty table near the windows, she felt his gaze lock onto her like a heat-seeking missile. Well, well, fresh meat. The words carried across the cafeteria, spoken just loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Emma kept walking, pretending she hadn't noticed the sudden hush that fell over Derek's section. The way conversations paused and heads turned. She'd learned in California that acknowledgement was invitation, and she had no desire to be invited into whatever game Derek Matthews was playing. She chose a table by herself, pulling out a paperback novel as a shield against unwanted conversation. The words blurred on the page, but the book gave her hands something to do. Somewhere to look besides the growing audience she could feel gathering around Derek's table. "Excuse me." The voice was deeper up close, carrying the confidence of someone who'd never been told no in any way that mattered. Emma looked up to find Derek standing beside her table, his smile wider now, more predatory. Up close, she could see the calculation in his green eyes, the way he angled his body to ensure their conversation would be visible to as much of the cafeteria as possible. "I don't think we've been introduced. Derek Matthews." He didn't extend his hand, just stood there radiating the kind of casual arrogance that came from being 17 and untouchable. "You're new." It wasn't a question. Emma closed her book, finger marking her place, and looked up at him with the polite blankness she'd perfected over the past few months. "Yeah?" The single word hung in the air between them. Derek's smile flickered. Just for a moment he was clearly expecting more. Some indication of interest, or at least recognition of his status. Behind him, Emma could see his friends watching, phones discreetly pointed in their direction. Whatever this was, it was being recorded for posterity. "Not much of a talker, huh?" Derek's tone remained light, but something harder crept into his eyes. "That's okay. I like the mysterious type. Why don't you sit with us? I can introduce you to everyone. Show you how things work around here." The invitation sounded casual, but Emma had grown up on military bases. She understood power structures, recognized the difference between requests and commands. This wasn't Derek asking her to join his table. This was Derek informing her that she would join his table. Because that's what girls did when Derek Matthews invited them. "Thank you, but I'm fine here." Emma's voice stayed level, polite. She opened her book again, a clear dismissal. The cafeteria grew quieter. Even tables across the room seemed to sense the shift in atmosphere, the way the air pressure changes before a storm. Derek stood frozen for a heartbeat, his smile completely gone now, replaced by something colder. "I'm trying to be nice here," he said, and his voice dropped lower, meant for her ears only. "You're new, so maybe you don't understand how things work. But trust me, you want to be on my good side." Emma looked up at him again, and for just a moment, let her father's training show in her eyes the calm assessment of a threat, the calculation of distance and leverage. Derek was bigger, stronger, surrounded by allies, but he was also broadcasting his intentions to a room full of witnesses, letting ego override strategy. "I said I'm fine." This time her voice carried just enough steel to make Derek's jaw clench. "Thank you for the invitation." She stood, gathering her things with deliberate calm. The cafeteria watched in fascination as the new girl walked away from Derek Matthews, leaving him standing alone beside an empty table. Emma could feel the weight of their stares, hear the whispered conversations starting up like brush fires. She'd just painted a target on her back, and they both knew it. The rest of the day passed in a haze of introductory lectures and nervous energy. Teachers stumbled over her name during roll call. Classmates stared with the frank curiosity reserved for zoo animals. And Emma felt the familiar exhaustion that came from performing normalcy for 8 hours straight. But underneath the surface fatigue, something else was stirring a restless alertness that her father would have recognized. The first shot was fired during 6th period chemistry. Emma was bent over her notebook, copying molecular diagrams from the whiteboard, when she felt someone bump her chair. Hard. Her pencil skittered across the page, leaving a jagged line through her neat notes. She looked back to find Tyler Bennett, one of Derek's friends from the cafeteria, sliding into the seat behind her with an innocent expression. "Sorry," he said, loud enough for nearby students to hear. "Clumsy me." Emma turned back to her notes without responding. 2 minutes later. It happened again. This time Tyler's knee drove into the back of her chair with enough force to jar her teeth. Her pencil snapped. "Oops," Tyler's voice carried mock concern. "Maybe you should sit somewhere else. I seem to have a problem with space management." Around them, other students were starting to notice. Some looked uncomfortable. A few seemed entertained, but no one said anything. The teacher was focused on his equations, oblivious to the drama unfolding in the back row. Emma pulled a new pencil from her bag and continued taking notes. Tyler bumped her chair a third time, harder now, and she felt something inside her chest grow cold and still, the same feeling she got during sparring sessions with her father, when the playful practice suddenly shifted into something more serious. She turned around slowly, fixing Tyler with a stare that made him blink and lean back slightly. "Touch my chair again," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And we're going to have a problem." Tyler's mouth opened, probably to deliver some clever comeback, but something in Emma's eyes made the words die in his throat for just a moment. He looked uncertain, like he'd poked what he thought was a sleeping cat and discovered it was actually a coiled snake. But the moment passed. Tyler glanced around at the students watching, seemed to remember his audience and his reputation, and leaned forward again. "Is that a threat? California girl." The nickname hit like a slap. Emma felt heat rise in her cheeks, felt the familiar burn of tears she refused to shed. California girl, like her entire life, her father's sacrifice, their family's pain, could be reduced to some dismissive label. She turned back to her notes without answering, but her hands were shaking now. Tyler didn't bump her chair again, but she could feel him behind her for the rest of class. A presence like a storm cloud gathering strength. After school. Emma found her mother's car in the pickup line and slid into the passenger seat with relief. The day felt like a marathon she'd barely survived. Each interaction, a small battle that had left her drained. "How was it?" her mother asked, pulling away from the curb. She was trying for casual, but Emma could hear the worry underneath. "Fine." There was that word again, doing its job like a shield wall against further questions. They drove in silence for a few blocks before her mother spoke again. "Emma, I know this is hard. Starting over. New school. Everything that's happened. If you need to talk about anything." "I'm handling it, Mom." Emma stared out the window at the unfamiliar neighborhoods rolling past, strip malls and chain restaurants, everything clean and new and nothing like the life they'd left behind. "I just need time to adjust." Her mother nodded, but Emma could see the concern in the way she gripped the steering wheel. They were both drowning. Really. Just taking turns holding each other's heads above water. That night, Emma sat on her bedroom floor, surrounded by unpacked boxes, trying to focus on homework, but finding her mind wandering to Tyler's mocking smile, Derek's cold calculation, the feeling of being watched and measured, and found wanting. She'd handled worse before military kids learned early how to navigate new social landscapes, how to find their place in the pecking order. But this felt different somehow, more dangerous. She was reaching for her history textbook when her fingers brushed against something unexpected. The black belt somehow migrated from the drawer to the bottom of a box labeled Emma's Room. She lifted it carefully, feeling its familiar weight, remembering her father's voice during their last training session. Violence should always be the last resort, princess, but when someone pushes you to that last resort, you make sure they remember why they shouldn't have pushed. Emma folded the belt carefully and placed it in her top dresser drawer, right next to her school supplies, just in case. The next morning brought the first real escalation. Emma arrived at school to find her locker decorated with graffiti stuck up, spray-painted in red letters across the metal door. Students walked past, pretending not to notice, but she could feel their sideways glances, hear the whispered conversations that died when she got too close. The janitor was already there with cleaning supplies, scrubbing at the paint with resignation that suggested this wasn't his first rodeo. "Sorry about this, hon," he said without looking at her. "I'll have it cleaned up before first period." Emma nodded her thanks and opened her locker to find her books scattered across the bottom, papers torn and crumpled. Her chemistry homework, 3 hours of careful work, was shredded into confetti. Taped to the inside of her locker door was a printed screenshot from Instagram, a fake account with her school photo that claimed she thought she was too good for Texas boys. The account had 50 followers already, 50 people who were now part of whatever game Derek was playing. Emma gathered her remaining intact materials and closed the locker, her movements deliberately calm around her. The hallway continued its morning rhythm, students chatting, locker doors slamming, the distant sound of sneakers on polished floors. But underneath the normalcy, she could feel the current of anticipation, like electricity in the air before lightning strikes. Derek was making his opening moves, testing her reactions, seeing how far he could push before she broke. It was a strategy she recognized from her father's stories about psychological warfare probe for weaknesses. Apply pressure gradually. Make the target feel isolated and overwhelmed. But Derek had made one crucial miscalculation. He was treating Emma like just another teenage girl, someone who would crumble under social pressure and public humiliation. He didn't know about the years of martial arts training, the discipline beaten into her through thousands of hours of practice. He didn't know about the steel core her father had forged in her, tempered by loss and hardened by grief. Most importantly, he didn't know that Emma Collins had already lost everything that mattered to her, which meant she had nothing left to lose. The morning classes passed in a blur of sideways glances and whispered conversations. Teachers droned on about algebraic equations and historical dates, while Emma sat in the back rows, cataloging faces, identifying allies and enemies with the methodical precision her father had taught her. The battlefield was taking shape, and she was starting to understand the rules of engagement. By lunchtime, the Instagram account had grown to over 100 followers. New posts appeared throughout the morning, photos clearly taken without her knowledge. Comments ranging from mildly mocking to genuinely cruel. Someone had found her father's obituary online and posted it with the caption, "Guess the apple doesn't fall far from the dead tree." Emma stared at her phone screen in the bathroom, that comment burning like acid in her chest. Her father's sacrifice, his service, his love reduced to ammunition in a teenage popularity contest. The grief she'd been carefully managing for months threatened to overflow. mixing with something newer and more dangerous: rage. She'd been taught to control it, channel it, use it as fuel rather than let it consume her. But this felt different, cleaner somehow, more focused. This wasn't the wild fury of grief, but the cold calculation of someone who'd been pushed too far. Emma closed her phone and looked at herself in the bathroom mirror. The hollow-eyed girl from that morning was gone, replaced by someone harder, more determined. Someone who looked like her father's daughter. She had homework to do, research to conduct, and a war to plan. Because Derek Matthews had just made this personal. The rest of the day brought more small cruelties, gum stuck to her desk chair. Her backpack knocked to the floor during the rush between classes. Snickering comments just loud enough for her to hear, but quiet enough to maintain plausible deniability. Each incident was minor in isolation. But together, they formed a pattern of escalating harassment designed to make her feel helpless and alone. But Emma wasn't alone. Not really. Every technique her father had taught her, every lesson about strategy and patience and choosing your battles, was there in her muscle memory. Every story he'd told her about overcoming impossible odds, about finding strength when everyone counted you out, lived in her bones. As she walked to her mother's car at the end of the day, Emma felt something she hadn't experienced since the accident, a sense of purpose. Derek wanted a war. She'd give him one, but it would be fought on her terms, according to her rules, with weapons he didn't even know she possessed. That night, she unpacked the black belt and placed it on her dresser where she could see it. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. But first, she had some reconnaissance to do, and a few old friends to reconnect with, the kind of friends who lived in the shadows of cyberspace and knew how to dig up secrets that powerful families preferred to keep buried. Derek Matthews had no idea what he had just awakened, and by the time he figured it out, it would be far too late. The first week of Derek's campaign unfolded like a masterclass in psychological warfare. Emma's tires were slashed twice, once in the school parking lot, once outside their apartment complex. Her lunch disappeared from her locker daily, forcing her to survive on vending machine snacks. Anonymous texts flooded her phone at all hours. Leave while you still can. Nobody wants you here. Your daddy's watching you from hell. But Derek had underestimated his opponent. While he was playing high school games, Emma was conducting a military-grade intelligence operation. She'd learned her father's lessons well. Every incident went into a composition notebook: dates, times, witnesses, photographic evidence. She installed hidden camera apps on her phone, documented every social media post, screenshot every cruel message. Her laptop became command central. 3 monitors displaying Instagram feeds, school records, and public databases. What she found made her blood run cold. Derek Matthews wasn't just a garden-variety bully. He was a predator with a pattern, protected by wealth and willful blindness. The deeper Emma dug, the more victims emerged from the shadows: girls who'd transferred schools, dropped out, or simply learned to stay invisible. The break came on a Tuesday night, when a direct message appeared in her Instagram inbox. "We need to talk. Meet me at Miller's Coffee tomorrow after school. Come alone." S. Emma stared at the message, her heart racing. She'd seen the name in her research: Sarah Miller. Sophomore, transferred to Westfield last year. Grades dropped dramatically after homecoming. No social media presence. No extracurriculars. A ghost walking the halls. Miller's Coffee sat 3 blocks from campus. a tiny shop that catered to college students and insomniacs. Emma arrived early, choosing a corner table with clear sightlines to both entrances. Her father's voice echoed in her head. "Never sit with your back to the door, princess. Never trust a meeting you can't walk away from." Sarah Miller looked like she'd been carved from paper, translucent skin. Hollow cheeks, movements careful and controlled, like someone afraid of taking up too much space. She slid into the opposite chair without ordering anything, her hands wrapped around an empty cup like it was an anchor. "You're making waves," Sarah said without preamble. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Derek's losing his mind. His friends are asking questions." Emma leaned forward slightly. "What happened to you?" Sarah's laugh held no humor. "Same thing that happened to Katie Johnson before she transferred to private school. Same thing that happened to Maria Santos before her family moved back to San Antonio. Same thing that happened to Jennifer Wu before she—" Her voice cracked. "Jenny tried to kill herself last spring. Did you know that pills in her parents' bathroom? They found her just in time." The coffee shop suddenly felt too warm, too small. Emma's hands clenched into fists under the table. Why didn't anyone report him? Report him to who? Principal Morris plays golf with Derek's dad every weekend. Coach Williams recruited Derek personally. Sees him as his ticket to a college coaching job. Half the school board owes money to Matthew's construction. Sarah's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You think we didn't try? Jenny's parents filed a complaint? Guess what happened? Nothing. Derek claimed they were dating. Said she was just upset about their breakup. His word against hers. And his word carries weight in this town." Emma pulled out her phone, opening the voice recording app. "Tell me everything. All of it. I need names, dates, details." Sarah stared at the device like it was a loaded gun. "You don't understand. My mom works for Matthew's Construction. If Derek's dad finds out I talked to you—" "Sarah!" Emma's voice was steady, commanding. "Look at me." The girl raised her eyes, and Emma saw something familiar there, the same hollow desperation she'd carried for months after her father's death. "I'm not going to let him hurt anyone else," Emma said. "But I need your help, please." For a long moment, they sat in silence. Then Sarah began to talk. The story that emerged was worse than Emma had imagined. Derek didn't just bully, he systematically destroyed girls who rejected him, using his father's influence to escape consequences. The pattern was always the same: public humiliation, social isolation, escalating harassment, until the victim either submitted or disappeared. "He calls it breaking them in," Sarah whispered. "Like we're horses that need training." By the time Sarah finished talking, Emma's notebook was full, and her resolve was diamond hard. She had 5 documented victims, 3 families that had been financially pressured into silence, and 1 school administration that had chosen money over morality. "What are you going to do?" Sarah asked. Emma closed her notebook. "I'm going to end him." The second week brought escalation. Derek had clearly grown tired of subtle psychological warfare and moved to more direct tactics. Emma's locker was broken into again, this time filled with raw meat that made the hallway reek for hours. Photos of her father's accident scene, somehow obtained from police files, were taped to bathroom mirrors and classroom doors. The fake Instagram account multiplied, spawning dozens of sock puppet profiles that followed her through cyberspace like digital vultures. But the worst came on Friday afternoon. Emma was leaving biology when she heard familiar laughter from the parking lot, through the window. She saw Derek and his friends gathered around her mother's beat-up Honda, Tyler holding a baseball bat while Brandon kept watch. As she watched in horror, Tyler brought the bat down on the windshield with a sound like breaking bones. Emma ran. By the time she reached the parking lot, they were gone, leaving behind $1,000 in damage and a note tucked under the windshield wiper. "Next time we won't stop with the car." Her mother cried when she saw it, the first time Emma had seen her break down completely since the funeral. They sat in the parking lot holding each other while school security guards took photos and filed reports that everyone knew would disappear into administrative limbo. "Maybe we should move again," her mother whispered. "Find somewhere else to start over." Emma felt something crystallize in her chest, a cold, pure rage that had nothing to do with her own pain and everything to do with protecting the woman who'd already lost so much. "No," she said. "We're not running anymore." That night, Emma made her final preparations. She practiced her forms in the garage until her muscles ached, running through combinations her father had drilled into her since childhood. She updated her evidence files, uploaded everything to secure cloud storage, and composed several emails with delayed delivery settings. Sunday evening. She stood in front of her mirror wearing the black belt for the first time since her father's death. The weight of it felt familiar, comforting, like coming home after a long journey. Tomorrow would bring the end game. And Emma Collins was ready. Monday morning arrived gray and humid, the kind of Texas weather that made everyone irritable and looking for a fight. Emma dressed carefully: white blouse, dark jeans, sneakers with good grip, clothes that wouldn't restrict movement, in colors that would show damage clearly. The hallway felt different as she walked to her locker. Conversation stopped when she passed, students clustering in groups with their phones already out. The air thrummed with anticipation, like everyone could sense something was coming. Derek was waiting by her locker, flanked by Tyler and Brandon. But this time was different. There were too many witnesses, too many phones pointed in their direction. This wasn't random harassment. This was a performance, carefully choreographed for maximum impact. "Well, well," Derek said, his voice carrying across the hallway. "If it isn't California, girl, I heard about your car. Real shame." Emma opened her locker without responding, but she could feel the crowd gathering, forming a loose circle around them. Someone had clearly spread the word. This was the main event, the moment everyone had been waiting for. "You know what I think," Derek continued, stepping closer. "I think you need to learn some respect. Texas, hospitality and all." "I think," Emma said quietly, still facing her locker. "You need to step back." Derek laughed, the sound echoing off the walls. "Or what you'll call your daddy. Oh wait, that's right, he's dead." The hallway went dead silent. Emma's hands stilled on her textbooks, her entire body going very calm, very focused. In her peripheral vision, she could see phones recording, capturing every word. "Yeah, I heard all about it," Derek continued, emboldened by her lack of reaction. "Drunk driver got him. Right, died like a coward. Probably crying for his mommy." Emma turned around slowly, and something in her movement made Derek take an involuntary step backward. She looked different, centered, balanced, dangerous. "Walk away, Derek," she said. Her voice was conversational, almost friendly. "This is your last chance." But Derek was too committed now, too aware of his audience to back down. He grabbed her shoulder, fingers digging in hard enough to bruise. "You don't give me chances, bitch. I give you—" Emma moved like lightning, her hand coming up to break his grip with a technique that sent Derek stumbling backward. The crowd gasped, phones shifting to get better angles. "Don't touch me," Emma said. Derek's face went red with humiliation and rage. He lunged forward, grabbing the front of her white blouse with both hands. The fabric was thin. Delicate, it tore easily when he yanked, ripping from collar to waist in one violent motion. The sound of tearing fabric echoed through the hallway like a gunshot. Emma stood there for a heartbeat, her torn shirt hanging open, sports bra visible underneath. She didn't try to cover herself, didn't scream or cry or run. Instead, she looked directly into Derek's eyes and smiled a cold, predatory expression that made him suddenly realize he'd made a terrible mistake. "Thank you," she said softly. "Now everyone can see exactly who you are." Derek swung at her face, putting all his weight behind the punch. But Emma wasn't there anymore. She ducked low and to the right, her hand coming up in a perfect knife hand strike that caught Derek in the throat with surgical precision. He dropped like a stone, hands clutching his neck, gasping for air. Tyler charged from the left, his bulk impressive, but his technique non-existent. Emma sidestepped, grabbed his extended arm, and used his momentum to send him crashing into the lockers. The impact was tremendous, metal buckled, and Tyler slid to the floor with a groan. Brandon hesitated, suddenly realizing he was facing someone far more dangerous than he'd anticipated. But he was committed now. Too many witnesses to back down. He came in low, trying to tackle her around the waist. Emma's knee came up to meet his face with a sound like breaking kindling. Brandon dropped immediately, blood streaming from his nose. The entire fight had lasted less than 10 seconds. Emma stood in the center of the hallway, breathing steady, her torn shirt hanging open like a banner of war. Around her, 200 students held their phones high, recording every angle of Derek Matthews writhing on the floor while his friends groaned in defeat. "Anyone else?" Emma asked, her voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence. No one moved. No one spoke. Emma walked to her locker, pulled out a spare shirt, and changed right there in the hallway. Then she gathered her books, stepped over Derek's prone form, and walked toward the principal's office. "I'll be waiting for the police," she called over her shoulder. "I have some evidence to share." The video hit social media before Emma reached the main office. Within an hour, justice for Emma was trending locally. By lunch, it had gone national. The footage was crystal clear, Derek destroying her shirt, Emma defending herself with minimal necessary force, his friends learning the hard way that actions have consequences. But more importantly, Emma's carefully prepared evidence dump went live simultaneously across multiple platforms. Police reports that had been buried, medical records from Derek's victims, financial documents showing the Matthews family's donations to school board members, recorded phone calls where Derek bragged about his conquests. The house of cards collapsed in real time. Derek was arrested that afternoon on charges ranging from assault to sexual harassment. His father's construction company faced federal investigation for bribery and corruption. Principal Morris resigned in disgrace. Coach Williams was fired when additional evidence surfaced of his role in covering up Derek's crimes. Most importantly, Derek's victims finally found their voices. Sarah Miller gave a tearful interview to local news. Jenny Wu's parents filed new complaints with fresh evidence. Katie Johnson transferred back to Westfield, no longer afraid. Emma stood in the hallway 3 weeks later, watching new students navigate their first day with the same terror she'd once felt. But now, there were differences: a zero-tolerance policy for harassment, mandatory reporting procedures, and something more intangible, but equally important: respect. "You did it," Sarah said, joining her by the windows. The girl looked different now, stronger, more solid. like someone who'd remembered how to take up space in the world. Emma shook her head. We did it. All of us. That afternoon, Emma taught her first self-defense class in the school gymnasium. 37 girls showed up, ranging from freshmen to seniors, all united by the understanding that sometimes you have to fight for your right to exist peacefully. Violence should always be the last resort, Emma told them, echoing her father's words. But when someone pushes you to that last resort, you make sure they remember why they shouldn't have pushed. As she demonstrated basic techniques, Emma felt her father's presence like a warm hand on her shoulder. The black belt around her waist was no longer a burden or a memory, it was a promise, a commitment to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Derek Matthews was serving 6 months in juvenile detention, his college prospects destroyed, his family's reputation in ruins. But his downfall was just the beginning. Emma had found her purpose, and she was just getting started. That night, she sat in her room responding to messages from girls across the country who'd seen her story, who'd found courage in her example. Each message was a reminder that monsters like Derek existed everywhere, hiding behind privilege and silence. But silence could be broken. Privilege could be stripped away. And monsters, when dragged into the light, were just scared little boys who'd never learned that the world didn't owe them anything. Emma Collins had learned to fight in more ways than one, and she was going to teach others to do the same. One black belt at a time. The war wasn't over, but the first battle had been won, and that was enough to start changing the world. 6 months later, Emma received a package with no return address. Inside was a newspaper clipping from a small town in Oregon, a story about a sophomore named Maya Chen who'd used martial arts to defend herself against 3 upperclassmen who'd been harassing her for weeks. At the bottom, someone had written in careful handwriting, "Thank you for showing me I could fight back. A friend." Emma added the clipping to a growing scrapbook filled with similar stories. Letters from girls in Michigan who'd started self-defense clubs. Photos from a Texas state wrestling tournament where Sarah Miller had taken 2nd place. News articles about bullying policies changed. Administrators fired. And most importantly, victims who'd found their voices. The black belt now hung in a place of honor on her bedroom wall, no longer hidden in drawers or buried beneath grief. Below it, her father's purple heart caught the afternoon light. Both medals serving as reminders of different kinds of courage, his service to country, hers to justice. Her mother had found her strength too, landing a better job with a law firm that specialized in educational discrimination cases. They'd moved to a real house with a garage where Emma taught evening classes, her student roster growing every week. The hollow-eyed woman who'd driven her to school that first terrifying day was gone, replaced by someone who'd remembered how to fight for her daughter and herself. "You know what your father would say about all this?" her mother asked one evening, watching Emma demonstrate a joint lock to a group of middle schoolers. Emma paused mid-demonstration. "What?" "That he's proud. But not because you can fight." Her mother's eyes were bright with tears that weren't sad anymore. "Because you taught others that they don't have to suffer in silence, that they're worth defending." As the class ended and students filed out, chattering excitedly about next week's lesson, Emma felt something she hadn't experienced since before the accident completeness. The broken pieces of herself had been reassembled, not into what she was before, but into something stronger, more purposeful. Derek Matthews was a footnote now, serving his sentence while Emma built something larger than revenge, a movement. A awakening. a reminder that sometimes one person willing to stand up can change everything. Her father had taught her to fight, but Emma had learned something even more valuable: how to teach others to fight for themselves. The revolution was just beginning.